this morning comes from the book of Ephesians in the 4th chapter. Let us listen for God's word. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people and their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
And it asks for a letter of recommendation from a Boston investment firm for a young man who is being considered for employment. The investment firm couldn't say enough good things about this young man. They wrote that his father was a Cabot, his mother was a Lowell. Further back was a happy blend of Saltonstalls and Peabodys and others of Boston's first families. That recommendation, they said, was given without hesitation. Well, it was several days later, the Chicago bank sent a note to the Boston firm saying that the information supplied was altogether inadequate and that they were not interested in the young man for breeding purposes. They wanted him for a job. Did you realize that while our genetic DNA is important, there is no guarantee that people sharing genes will be sharing much of anything else? You know, for instance, there was a man in Ohio who knew that his father was one of 3 brothers. As adults, all 3 men spent their working years in different parts of the country. They seldom were together at the same time. And as a result, the man had first cousins that he couldn't have recognized if he passed them on the street. And a few years ago, his uncle gave to him all of the addresses for his cousins. And so the guy thought, well, I'm going to send them all a Christmas card with a personal handwritten note. And he did. And he didn't get one note or card in return. And he said that it wasn't that there's any bad feeling among them. It's just that there's no feeling among them. They just hadn't had the kinds of shared experiences that are necessary to make themselves think of themselves as family. Even so, you might not have much feeling for a cousin who lives on the other side of the country, but if she's your cousin, she's your cousin. She's family. And it's that perception, more than the blood connection, that provides that sense of kinship. And that's the point in the Ephesians passage that I read this morning. The family of God is populated by people who share the same spiritual DNA.
The church is composed of people who, spiritual DNA aside, do not share the same genes, but we share the same grace. The strongest ties of kinship are normally between those who have grown up in the same household and were cared for by the same parents. However, groups that wish to be cohesive can foster family feelings. And you know how we do this. We do this by getting together and having a meal together, sharing communion together, using those kinship metaphors referring to the body as our brothers and sisters, telling people that they've all descended from maybe the same patriarch, that they're connected to a specific land, that they hold in common a specific story, so that they all came into being by this same creative act. This morning we see that the Apostle Paul is doing something like that, describing what the church is intended to be. He says, I beg you to lead a life of worthy calling. You have been called. Make every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in a bond of peace. There's one body. There's one Spirit. On other occasions, when Paul was writing to the church in Galatia, Paul even used the word family, which in Greek is household. He used that word to refer to the church. There's no question that Paul believed that there would be a kinship among Jesus' followers that goes beyond blood relationship. Paul knew that God desired all along that everyone would become a part of his family. And that's why in earlier chapters in Ephesians, Paul says, God destined us for adoption as his children through Jesus Christ, according to the good pleasure of his will. So we may not all have the same genes, but we have the same grace. We are family. What does it mean to be family? Don't you think about your own family? Think about all those people comprising your extended family. You can no doubt think of people in your extended family that you just may not agree with. And you may not agree with them most of the time. You may differ on politics or religion, behavior, values, or just about anything else. It's much like the woman who appeared in court for a traffic violation. She had run a red light, and the judge asked her about her occupation. She said she was an elementary school teacher. And the judge said, "Oh, wonderful, I've been waiting for this for a long time. I want you to take this paper and this pen, and I want you to go sit in the back of the courtroom, and I want you to write 1,000 times, I will never run a red light again in my life for as long as I live." You remember doing that? Remember having to sit and write those things? I wonder, from the judge's joyous behavior, how many times he had to do that very thing, and he now had the perfect opportunity to get even. In our family circle, there are folks who act out of their own experience. And maybe that was what was behind the child who went to school on the first day, and the first grader handed his teacher a note from his mother. And the note said, "The opinions expressed by this child are not necessarily those of his parents." Healthy families, even those who have opinions expressed by one member that may not be the ones of other family members, they understand that any one member will come to the aid of another when needed. Families that are functional often will not have uniformity, but they will have an underlying unity. Families that are functional will have differences, but not division. In families that are functional, members can count on each other, not for agreement, but to be there. To be there when someone needs help or support. It's been said that snowflakes are frail, but if enough of them get together, they can stop traffic. In calling the church the family of faith, Paul set a goal for the followers of Jesus as they function in congregations, to be people who are there for one another. You heard that in prayer concerns this morning, to be there for one another. And Christ makes that possible. And then if we are the people of God here in this place, then we can carry out those activities out there. You know, we look at our political world and we see the problem of the inability to work together. You know, profiles in courage among our senators and Congress people sometimes are in short supply. You know, rather than people who have competing ideas that can be sharpened by honest debate, the image that sometimes comes to mind is that of children fighting in a sandbox. But before we get too enthusiastic about pointing fingers at the politicians, we need to recognize that many of the debates that seem to be splitting our churches also carry some of that tone. In the Ephesians passage I read, Paul speaks to a church that is also experiencing splits and urges that we no longer be children that are tossed to and fro and blown about by every kind of doctrine or thought or trickery. While we can bemoan the behavior of some politicians who seem to be focused sometimes on self-serving actions rather than on what's good for the whole country, our witness as the church is diluted when we are unable to demonstrate a better way. Doctrine and right belief are very important, but it is Christ, not our beliefs, that is the head of the church. It is only as we recognize that our loyalty to Christ is above all else that we will have the courage to live together in unity, to be the family of God in a way that causes the world to notice that there is something unique about our faith that compels us to live differently. And I think about this in relation to what happened with a little boy and his mother. His name was Jeremy. Jeremy's mother had to work late one night. It was really late by the time she got to the daycare center to pick him up. And when they got home, she was tired, really tired, and she said, "I'm not cooking supper." So she gets out the oatmeal and says, "We're just going to have a bowl of oatmeal for dinner tonight." Well, Jeremy didn't like oatmeal for breakfast, let alone to have to eat it for supper. And he decided that he just needed to tell his mother that he didn't want to eat oatmeal. And she told him he needed to be grateful that God had provided some food for them to eat. And little Jeremy thought about that for a while, but he wasn't convinced. As a matter of fact, he didn't think God had anything to do with it anyway. There was oatmeal that his mother put in front of him. And so Jeremy decided he was going to tell his mother all about that too. And he ended up being sent to his room. And he's in his room for a little while, and all of a sudden a storm came up. There was thunder, and there was lightning, and the sky was flashing with all of this lightning and thunder. And finally, lightning hit the tree right outside of his bedroom window. It just shook the house. And after about 5 minutes of this storm, Jeremy folded his hands, and he looked upward toward the ceiling, and he said, "Boy, howdy, God, this is an awful lot of fuss for just a bowl of oatmeal." We can't expect uniformity in the church any more than we can expect uniformity among family members. But We should aim at being the people who are still there when people are in pain or people who have needs. Kinship is a critical component of this life of ours, but it's something larger than a genetic connection. We embrace Christ as our brother. We embrace God as our parent. And the mystery of our faith is that we're given a divine nature to live and to behave as the children of God that we are. We are family. We have the spiritual genes, and we have the grace. Thanks be to God. Amen.